let's start off with this college football playoff discussion because I don't know how I feel about a 12-team playoff. We've talked about ever since like year one. After the first year, let's expand it to 6 teams. Let's expand it to 8 teams, 10 teams. My problem with that though is like we already have an issue now where we want to expand it by a couple teams to get 5 and 6 in because we feel like they're good enough to be in there. If we expand it to 12 teams, it's not going to really solve that problem because teams that are sitting at 13 and 14 and 15 are going to think they have legitimate arguments to get in. And at that point, you might as well just make it a March Madness bracket of 64 teams.
I would not, as a fan, I would be completely okay with that. But as an
That's a lot of football.
As an ex-football player, yes, that is a lot of games to be played. You would definitely have to spread that out.
That's longer than the NFL season.
Absolutely. Yeah, just the bracket by itself would be rivaled to a regular season. But I am on board with expanding it. I do agree with your controversy of 13 and 14 saying, hey, I thought we were good enough. But at the same time, once you start getting to 13 and 14, you start getting teams with 1 loss in there. And that's where you can be like, hey, these teams didn't lose. They were at the top of their game. And the way I understood it when they're talking about it is they're going to have 6 conference winners. So you got your Power Fives and then I think it's with the group of 5, it's one of their winners. And then it's 6 at-large teams. So not necessarily your conference winner, but teams who produce extremely well. So maybe you'll get somebody like, say, the SEC championship was Alabama versus Florida. If it was a super close game, even though Alabama won, if Florida, that was their only loss in the season, they played extremely well, they might still get in.
Right.
That's the way I understood it. And it could be completely different. It may just be the 5 conference winners and then 7 at-large teams, which would give teams like Notre Dame more of a chance because they don't have a conference championship. So they still have 7 slots to try to get in.
That's a fair point.
And we could see teams like BYU and Coastal Carolina and Cincinnati where they're not the top tier, but they're still an at-large team. We can give them their chance and see how they prove. We can not have a situation like UCF with they're saying they're the national champions when they didn't even make the tournament. I was
just about to say like it would help a team like UCF who went undefeated 2 years in a row get into the playoff. Yeah.
So look at us already on the same page. Never missed a step. But I think it just gives more room for just saying things and less room for error. Actually, I guess more room for error because you'd be able to sneak into those lower seeds, but less room for error in the sense that
you're definitely going to get the best teams. You're definitely going to get like the 4 or 5 best teams. And then once you get to that middle and lower end of those 12 teams, that's a little bit more debatable, I suppose. So I think it kind of makes it a little harder maybe in that respect because
it's harder. It's definitely harder.
You're also getting to 2-loss teams too once you get down to like 10 and 12. So how do you determine which 2-loss team is better than the other?
Absolutely. I think it creates a great debate. I think it's a safer option for the playoff committee because then there's not as much controversy between picking a 4 and 5 as opposed to picking a 12 and 13. I think because there was the year that Ohio State missed it, Oklahoma got in, and there was just total controversy because they're like, oh, we were the better team, but they got in. And it's not as serious of a debate at 12 and 13, I believe.
I agree with that, and that's probably why I would side with going the 12-team route, or if it's a little bit lower, like 8 teams or whatever. I agree with you on that standpoint. I always thought it would be cool. What if you just did the 5 Power 5 conference winners and then just the next best team, which that's a lot of debate. Who's the next best team? Like if you lose in your conference championship, I guess, how do you like 1 out of 5 teams? But then that's also kind of unfair to the teams like a UCF or a Coastal Carolina or BYU or whatever. But I guess in fairness, like, those schools aren't, Ohio State and Clemson and Alabama.
Absolutely. So, they're not meant to be. They're called Power 5 conferences.
Right.
I understand. I see both sides of it. And that's why As a fan, I'm totally for it because it just means more football for me to watch. And if there was a safe way without getting too many games involved, if you could do like all the losers of their conference championship, if you could have a little tournament of that, and the winner of
Right.
that gets the sixth seed. Um,
This see like that would be
but
fun, but
that's
again,
just
that's
too many games.
it's too much football. Yeah.
Yeah, by the time that 16 makes it to the tournament, they have 4 more games on their belt or something like that before they even get to the actual playoff.
Right.
Um,
Oh, and they're probably going to be gassed too. And meanwhile, these other teams have been chilling for a month.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of room to work around a college football playoff expansion, but going about it is going to be very delicate because no matter what, you're going to make somebody unhappy. I would be okay with like a 10-team tournament where you have your winner and your loser from all your conference championships. That way you don't have to worry about the loser being the sixth best team, but at the same time that takes away of the importance of the conference championship because
Yeah,
regardless
exactly.
you're going to be in the tournament. Um,
I feel like this is like so deep of a conversation that like we're contradicting ourselves in a way. It makes sense in my mind, but I feel like there's just so many different ways you can kind of look at this, and it
Absolutely.
makes it so hard to determine what's the right thing to do.
Yeah, every time you open one door, 4 more doors appear. It's just you can never. I'm not gonna say you're ever gonna take the wrong path with it or the right path with it. There's just so many options that we haven't even explored yet for it. I think it creates for a lot of controversy, like I said, like you said, with contradicting each other and having somebody be unhappy at every point. But it creates for a lot of improvement with the college football system because fans in general are just not happy with the 14 playoff. They think it's not enough because the 4 and 5 is just such a delicate system because they're both good teams. You can't have 4 teams from 5 conferences make it because somebody's always going to be left out. And especially having teams like Notre Dame who don't have a conference and yet they're still getting in. Then you're having 2 conference winners that didn't make the playoffs.
Right.
And years like where we've had Alabama and LSU in the playoffs, you had 2 SEC teams, and other people were not happy about that because they felt that they were a better team because they had the conference championship on their side.
Right. And then that means you have 3 out of the 5 Power 5 conference winners in the tournament potentially.
Abs-
I don't remember what the rest of the field was like that year, but yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a delicate situation, but I think regardless, as long as they don't completely drop the ball in this, fans are going to be happy because they're going to get more football to watch and they're going to get some more good games in because you'll have teams with that necessarily wouldn't normally make it that are going to be like, "Hey, we got the shot this year. We got to make every move to take advantage of it because in a typical year we wouldn't get in as the 8 seed, but this year we can. So now we got to take that to the best of our ability."
Yeah, I think going to 8, 10, or 12, whatever number they decide on, is going to be better because it's going to ensure that you get those teams that are highly up for debate. And then I think it's kind of going back to like what you said. Once you get down to like 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 or whatever, however far you go down, less people are going to care about that. Obviously, those schools are going to care about it, but you're not going to hear about it on Sports Center every day about, um, you know, Coastal Carolina's complaining that they're sitting at 13 and they're not getting in at number 12. Like I don't think people are going to really complain about that as much, but like teams like Florida last year or Texas A&M or teams that were just on the outside, they're going to get in, and that's what people care about
Yeah, because
mostly.
you have your big teams, and it's increasing revenue too, which is going to have the
Yes,
NCAA on board in general. Because
that's probably the main motivation behind it, which is mostly
it's
everything
it's
is
very
money.
greedy, but it's more revenue for them. You get more teams in, you can sell more merch, you can have more national awareness and exposure. So you're gonna get more views, you're gonna get more people watching it, and you're gonna have more people talking about it. So that's
Mhm.
social media talk, and that's money right there. So I
Yeah.
think I think that's the whole. I think that's the main reason they're looking into it finally. But as a fan, I'll take what I can get.
Yeah, as long as they don't water it down too much with too many teams and they make this too long of a tournament and everybody's playing like these schools are playing like 16, 17, 18 games. If they're not, as long as they're not doing that and they don't water down the competition too much where it's like, okay, Alabama is clearly better than like Fresno State. Like, why are we even doing this? Then
Absolutely,
I
and
think they'll be
that's
okay.
And that's what I heard with the expansion is
No,
what they're
no
going to do.
disrespect to Fresno State,
No,
by the way.
absolutely not. Because I could not go out on a field and cover anybody from Fresno State or any other small
Right,
school.
exactly.
But it's just in comparison, that's like having like the Jets season last year going up against like I don't know the Saints or the Chiefs.
Yeah,
It's a mismatch in talent. And it's not fair. A lot of it in college, especially, there's a huge gap due to recruiting and financials. Where when you get to the NFL, everybody's the best of the best. But college, there's that massive gap, and it just creates a difference. But what I understood when they were talking about it is a possible first round bye for conference winners. That way, you can have your matchups in the first round, and then those winners will go play the conference champions. And I think that's a little rough in football because you get, like you said, a bye week to kind of recover and recuperate. But at the same time, it makes for something like a Fresno State won't play in Alabama or a UCF won't play in LSU because they are aware that hey, these guys probably won't win unless they already beat that other team. They're competitive enough to win.
right.
I
Yeah,
think baseline, there's a lot of room to work with this, and we could always do something like try it out 1 year, and if it doesn't work out the way they want, change it again. Because there's no limit to how much you can change this thing. Just
the
got to find the right system.
I think the problem is if you go to 12 and then you think that that's too much after 1 year, you can't lower it.
No,
You've got to
no.
keep it at 12. So I would almost rather them, expand it to
If you start with eight,
eight
and
next
then you can
year,
always move up
and then
again.
maybe you keep it that way for a couple years. And if you're like, okay, I think we can probably do a couple more, then you can do it. I think start small,
Yeah, because you
because
can't
if
backtrack.
you go too big and then you backtrack on it, you're gonna have like that's the end of the college football playoff, and you're just gonna go back to the BCS
Yeah,
format or some other new format that's hip and cool.
because then fans are going to be like, oh, well, you moved it up for these guys, but when we were this seed, we didn't get in. You're just going to make people unhappy.
Exactly. Exactly.
I definitely agree. You can't backtrack. So that's why I said it's a very delicate process, but I think there's room for improvement. I think I would be okay with starting with like an 8 team, see how that works. You can always move up to 10 or 12 after. But if you think you have it figured out and you want to do 12 teams now, again, that's just more games for me to
Yes.
watch.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. It's just you better stick by your guns if it doesn't
Yes,
go that well. Like
exactly.
you better stick to it and just work through the growing pains, because you can't go back. So
Exactly. And it may not work out for the first year just because it's different and people don't like change. It could
yeah.
just not work for that. And be like, oh well, this is not the same. It doesn't have the same feel because these games they understand that if they win this, they still have two more, so they're not necessarily playing as hard. Um, you're gonna have people who don't like it just because it's change. But I
Right.
think it's a step in the right direction to expand the college football playoffs.
Yes. And so is it like a probable, not a like it's more probable than not. Is that what you said?
The words I heard were it is more likely than not that the expansion will happen in the next two seasons.
Okay, so it's not necessarily for next year, but it's soon.
It just depends on how quickly they can sit down and get it agreed upon. But it is for the near future.
Gotcha.